Hey guys, welcome back to the MTT Principles series. This is Dang16 here with episode number 5. Today's going to be a little bit different than what you're used to in the series. To this point, we've kind of went with the big progression of a tournament, going from the early to the middle game. And, next up is kind of the late middle game, the bubble, entering the money, playing inside the money, up till the final table bubble, and then the final table and shorthanded. So, we've been in that progression. Today, I thought it would be a good time to inject my expected value episode. Expected value comes into play from the first hand of the tournament to the last. Maybe we talk about open shoving here quite a bit. Maybe you have that tournament where you never under 30 big blinds the entire tournament and absolutely run it over. Also, maybe you get to the point where you're down to 10 big blinds the first orbit of an MTT and need to open shove. So, expected value isn't just stick to one thing or to a couple of things. It's a huge concept in poker, and we'll talk about it. We'll correlate it with some different type of plays, fold equity, stuff like that. You'll see it in the episode. Also, this episode will be a bit smaller, a bit shorter. Just didn't really work out to mix a bunch of concepts together. I hope this is also a little bit difficult to explain some of the spots, and I don't know if I did the best job. I've actually already filmed all the information that you'll see. Feel free to ask questions. This again was a tough one, but it is a very important concept. So, hope it's good for you guys. So let's get started. All right, let's get started with expected value. Expected value, it's a very, very important concept in poker, especially in MTTs and Syngos. I also think that it's a term that's commonly thrown around incorrectly, used incorrectly, or it's just a concept that is misunderstood by a lot of players. Today my goal is to give you a much better understanding of expected value, what it is, why it is important, and how it affects many scenarios and plays in MTTs. So what is it? Expected value, or EV, as you've probably seen in the forums or in other literature, just describes whether or not a hand was played profitably or not. That's the absolute basics of it. It can be used to determine the profitability of just about any situation in poker, whether that be a shove, open shove, a reshove, a squeeze, whether or not those are profitable. Could be used to figure out if a set mine in certain spot is profitable, or whether or not just calling a shover good or bad. We're going to take a look at a lot of these situations today. If something is deemed to be profitable, it is considered positive expected value, or plus EV. If it's determined not to be profitable, then it's negative expected value, or minus EV. I also put neutral EV up there. It's used for scenarios that might be very borderline, right in that gray area where it could go either way. Just kind of wanted to throw that out there. Something you may have heard before. A situation's expected value is determined using a few important variables. Those may differ from situation to situation. Discussing whether a set mine is plus EV or an open shove is plus EV. This is, like comparing apples to oranges. While we are talking about the same concept, a couple of the variables will be the same, but there will also be some much different ones when in determining whether or not the set mine's profitable. So, these will be discussed when we do some expected value calculations. But the very basic examples of positive or negative expected value, getting aces all in pre-flop versus one random hand would of course be plus EV, something you would very much assume to, you know, be profitable in the long run. Also, let's say we shove seven deuce offsuit, even if we're only getting called by half the hands in the deck, it's going to be very minus expected value or minus EV in the long run. Why is expected value important? It's important because knowing the difference between a play that's plus EV and minus EV, is at the very basics the difference in whether or not you'll be a winning MTT player in your poker career. Of course, luck might shine through for a tournament here or there, or you might run good for a month or a year. But eventually, if you're making a lot of minus expected value plays, they're going to make you a loser in the long run. Eventually, that luck will catch up with you. Um, Looking at expected value, understanding how it's calculated and what it means is going to do a lot. Allow you to better analyze your game and studying hand histories of your own or others, or situations you may have seen someone else play or that you played yourself, or even just when thinking of hypothetical situations. You know, using the tools I give you and the ability to use SharkScope and some simple math and tinkering with these variables, I think it will help a lot of you guys and just really help you understand how to play some situations better. So yeah, we're going to discuss expected value at length today. We're going to correlate it to, open shoving, reshoving, squeezes, calling shoves, check shoving, speculative hands, quite a few things that we will talk about and couple it with. First thing I want to do is take a look at a basic example of an open shove situation and how to do a quick expected value calculation using PokerStove and some math. All right, so first thing I'm going to show you is the situation, and then we're going to take a look at PokerStove and also some basic math calculations, so you can put it all together to see how this particular hand was plus EV. This is at the 400 to 800 level of the tournament. It's a little bit further. We've just came off mid game and we're still, we're still there, but irrelevant. This is just an example from the other day that works well here. So the basics of this this is a situation where it's folded to me in the small blind. It's a spot where I elected to just open shove, and I want to take a look at the math behind it and why it's plus EV. So I had a pretty good understanding of this player, pretty good read, and I was able to range him pretty well, I think. And we'll pull up PokerStove here. Click on player 2. This is the range I give him. That's also tight, and it also works out well for math purposes. But we're just going to give him this tight range of any pair sevens and up. Anything in yellow here, ace-7 suited up, all suited broadways, and any Broadway except for Queen 10 and Jack 10, I've taken it out. As you can see right here, right about 15%. So when I make this shove, I'm going to be called 15% of the time, and this is my equity versus that range that calls me. So now that I have this information, and now we're going to make some assumptions and do the quick math to determine whether or not I feel shoving queen 10 in this spot is positive EV. Pull over this Word document real quick. Here's the assumptions. I'm going to pretend that we make this queen 10 shove with this stack size versus this stack size exactly 100 times. And on our assumptions, we're going to be called 15 times as shown by our poker stove analysis. We're going to get folds, so that means he's going to fold 85 times. So all right, let's do some quick math to determine whether or not it's plus EV. 85% of the time, we're going to pick up the 1800 chip pot. That is what's in the middle right now. You know what I get when I make that shove. Of the 15 times that I do get called, I'm going to win 5. That number came from here. You know, see this 32.8. That's roughly 1 in 3 times. So 5 out of 15. So those 5 times that I get called, I am going to bring in 12,367. And that's going to be what's in the middle plus the amount I get from doubling up. Of the 15 times I get called, I'm going to lose 10, of course, and those 10 I am going to lose 10,837 chips. So now we need to multiply all those out. 85 times 1800 equals that 153,000. 5 times 12, 367 equals 61,835. Those are chips coming into us because we've won. On the other hand, the 10 that we lose is going to be a loss of 108,370 chips over the life of this shove, over these 100 shoves. So we add those up, the wins, subtract out the loss, we get to a gain of 107,815, or 1,078 for every single hand. I understand this might be a lot for you guys, but look at it a couple different times and hopefully it will make more sense. So, you know, the basics of this little calculation is for every time that we shove here, we expect to return roughly 1,080, which is about a 10% return on the play. That's very much positive expected value, and if you know that is the case, and if you do in fact earn 10% on this shove, it's something that we're going to be doing. You know, every single opportunity that we get. Now, if it was closer to like 1 or 2%, where it is plus EV, but not as vast, you know, that's where we can discuss, you know, potentially folding. You know, it's something we didn't touch on too much in the opening, but not every single positive expected value situation needs to be had or needs to be taken. You know, a quick example on a complete and on the far end of the spectrum. You know, jamming pocket aces under the gun when we have 1,000 big blinds. Of course, that's going to be positive EV, but it's not going to be optimal. And on the other hand, even if you expect like a 3 or 4% return, something pretty good, you might be at a table that, or in a tournament that you have a humongous advantage of, and your pre-flop and post-flop play advantage is so vast that you can pass up on some neutral positive EV spots. Something we'll touch on a little bit further, but I hope that basic calculation helped. we will do some more calculations as well, but next let's talk about some other scenarios, and what the variables will be, when determining whether or not they're positive EV. All right, let's continue with expected value. First, let's just discuss some common situations and plays and talk about the variables that determine the expected value of these situations or these plays. I'm going to just keep it basic, for this slide and these plays. We're just going to assume that all of these result in an all in, whether it be open shoving all in, reshoving all in, calling an open shove, check shoving all in on the flop, or maybe lead re-raising. Those are just five plays that I like, and I think they're best for this expected value discussion. One of the variables that I really want you to focus on right now is fold equity. Other than with calling shoves, it might be the most important variable of the other four. With the example that we just looked at, fold equity was extremely important in the EV of the hand, because we were getting folds 85% of the time. So yeah, something that very much needs to be focused on when discussing these plays. Open shoving. Last week we briefly discussed my approach for playing different stack size. The 0 to 15 big blind range was absolutely dominated by open shoving. Also calling and reshoving as well, but 95% or more of my plays with that stack side is either just folding or getting it in, whether that get in may be with a shove, a reshove, or calling. But it's very important in MTTs. I can't really quantify it exactly, but maybe 90% of the time you end up under 15 blinds at some point. Obviously will depend on the player. Some people are nits and get really short, of course, but yeah, extremely important, bottom line. And it's also something that we could discuss for the entire series. I could sit here and poker stove hands with every feasible pre-flop, scenario ever. So I'm just going to try and keep it as simple as possible, as there's also a lot of other information online, and there's always the forums, for determining when you're going to open shove. Yeah, determining whether or not an open shove is positive EV. It's going to come down to those variables that we just looked at in the example. The effective stack, perceived calling range of the villain or the villains behind. Use the skills that I just showed you to, analyze situations. It's just simple math and poker stove. So, hopefully you understand how I did it and understand how to use it on your own. And also, as you understand those shoves and when to do them, the more you play, the more often you do it. These shoves are just going to become, a lot of them are just going to become easy and second nature. Then, all right, the next thing, reshoving. We touched on it a little bit as well, and the under 15 blind range, but I'll also open it up quite a bit. Up until, around 25 big blinds effective, I could just, reshove it all in. Sometimes even up to 30, depending on the table and the situation. The important variables again here obviously include the effective stack, your hand strength, and perceived calling range of the villain. I like to reshove against very active players that I know are opening a wide range of hands. Also, the tighter I think they're calling, the better. If I'm talking about jamming, reshoving 25 blinds into a guy with 40 blinds, I represent a huge chunk of his stack. So his calling range might even be tighter. But, maybe we reshove 25 blinds into a monstrous 200 blind stack. Even though his opening range is wide, his calling range might be a bit wider as well. So, the wider the range, the more fold equity I assume, and also, the tighter the calling range, of course, the more fold equity I can assume. Just as we did with the open shove, expected value calculation. I'm not going to do one for reshoving, but it's just going to be, the same thing. We're putting a villain, on a range, with a pot size that reflects, his open as well as the blinds. So it's very much the same math. Just a couple more variables, when looking at the expected value. With calling shoves, this is quite different than the other four scenarios on this slide. Calling a shove, it comes down to what you peg the villain's range to be, the effective stack. This might be blind versus blind. It could be completely opposite, but exactly the same. Meaning, maybe a 10 blind stack is shoving on you from the small blind, and we have 100 blinds, or 100 blind stack from the small blind is shoving on our 10. It's still the effective stack. That's what's most important. Of course, there's a lot of different situations, but it's always effective. Your hand, of course, extremely important when calling a villain's all in, but also who's to act behind. If there's a lot of situations where making a call is likely plus EV against the villain's range, but if there's 5-6 more people to act behind you and it's very marginal, those are the spots that we can pass up to that we can pass up just because because of the unknown. We do not know what is yet to happen behind us. Next up, check shoving. Something, I'm pretty sure we saw an example with a check shove of a draw when we were discussing draws earlier in the series. Well, it's something. It's an effective, a very effective play. And it's something that can be done with strength as a bluff or with draws. I'm going to take a look at a check shove spot with a draw, because I think it's a really good way to show fold equity, and how important it really is to a lot of these plus expected value plays. I've talked about fold equity being important. It's of course important with shoving and reshoving, but the example I have in mind, I think, will tie it all together quite well. Check shoving also can be very positive expected value, even when you have a huge hand, because it can add to our value. Maybe we're talking about against a very aggressive player who is going to bet any time that is checked to him, and he might not proceed after with any more betting, but at least you can use that check shove or a check raise in other scenarios, to build the pot and get a little bit more value. Also, going hand in hand, with the check shove, Lead re-raise, another play that I like to use, especially when deep, with a lot of draws or speculative hands, or also to price out, maybe an aggressive player who might be on a draw as well. So, another play that can be very much positive expected value, especially when used correctly. We'll discuss here. I think we can do a good hypothetical situation here where we might lead re-raise with a draw and show how it is going to have a positive expected value in the long run, and also helps us to manipulate this expected value and make it even better. All right, so we're gonna take a look at a reshove hand here. We did look at one last week as well at the end with some of the examples, but it was kind of for different reasons. It was more how to when you're getting a little bit shorter and how to combat an aggressive player. Today we're focusing on expected value and talking why certain hands are positive expected value, and here, focusing on fold equity quite a bit. Okay, player Nalakris here, about a 21 blind stack, pretty marginal, but he's also playing a ton of pots and entering a ton of pots. I looked at the HUD stat that I had for him at the given time, and it was 30, 36, 31 over I think it was 40 hands. So been playing a ton of hands. I'd also seen him open fold, fold quite a bit, and I want to keep him off my blind here, and reship on him here with the 6-7 suited. Now, I've got just under 30 blinds, but the effective stack here is 21. Also, it could be considered 23 as well because that who's stacked behind me. But I felt Z-Ban was going to be calling me very, very tightly here, and I just know how I just knew Nalakris had a huge range. So I'm not gonna go over, the math, like, using Poker Stove and all the other stuff we did earlier, and as we will again, but just wanted to give an example, a different example of a reshove. And we did get the fold here, and it's obviously not something I'm going to do every single time in that spot, but wanted to get him off my back, and I thought it was going to be. I knew I had a ton of fold equity, and that's what made this spot positive EV. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about is calling shoves, as that was on the slide. Important, something that comes into play a lot, especially from the blinds. You'll find more and more. Here's a spot where we're going to look at the situation, and after seeing the hand that he shows down, we're kind of gonna go reverse and use that hand to show on Poker Stove how wide his range actually is, and just how much equity we do have versus that range. So it's kind of a little bit different for determining plus EV. He's also a very good player who makes this shove. This is a very tough table, actually. But yeah, it just shows how wide people are stuffing. It might help you a lot. Jaspid UF, really good player. Shoves it in here. I know he's going to be very wide, especially with that stack. And I also don't know what he knew about me or how he perceived my play to be at all. For me, this was an easy shove here, as shown by what he showed up with. Not faulting him at all. He knows that my calling range might be pretty tight as well, and that could easily get through. So yeah, let's plug in. Let's clear this up. We're gonna be player one. we are going to have the ace of spades and the eight of clubs. All right, player two. You see, 7-9 offsuit was included in his range right here. Even if we just give him, we're still going to give him any pair, of course, any Broadway, of course, especially after seeing what he's shown. Definitely going to throw any ace in there. Definitely any suited ace again. Any suited king for sure. I'm going to give him any suited queen. I mean, look, he showed up with 9-7 offsuit. We can give him a humongous range. Any suited no gapper, and we'll just give him any king, and we'll give king 7 plus. There. Even it might even be wider, but that we're giving him 51% of hands, roughly 50 on the nose. You see, we have 55% equity here. That and again, this range could even be a little wider since we saw him show down 9-7 offsuit. So that 55% equity in this spot, coupled with, we already have 400 chips invested here, and there is the extra money from the antes, of course, to take into account. More than, even if we were a slight dog, it could make up for it and make it, give us 50% equity. But keep in mind here, people do shove light, especially the higher the buy-in and the more experienced people are going to shove more correctly. That's going to mean that you need to call more correctly. Tinker with this. It should help you. Should help you with a lot of these spots. Next example I want to take a look at is actually, it goes from a bit ago. I had a student here, Pro V1 here, who was kind of battling with expected value. Discussions with him were actually part of the idea to have this episode just on positive expected value. Because of how much he learned, and I think a lot of you guys that are watching the videos or the series are probably near the level he was at when we had this discussion. So let's take a look at it. Already actually have some stuff written up for this one, similar to what we did for the open shove. Another reiteration of expected value and how we can use it to our advantage. Right, he calls here in the big blind. There's actually some antes. I don't know why you can't see it, but it's tied into this pot size. But here we are, versus unknown aggressive player. That's what my student's read was here, and he bets 3,200 here into 3,600. What we're gonna do here is look at the math again, and it's gonna be very simple. So take a look over here at the Word document I have. We have some completely different assumptions here. I am going to assume, based off his read, that the type of the villain was betting quite a bit here, 3,200 into 3,600, and based off what my student ranged him at, it was, a lot of the time. All right, so let's take a look at a hand that coincides with check shoving and how it can be very much plus EV, and how it can also, you can use the check shove to, build the pot a little bit, kind of add some value to your to your return. So this is a hand that's actually from a student of mine who this discussion that him and I had actually spurred my idea to have a really long positive expected value discussion in the series. It just ties in with so much and is so important that yeah, kind of was the reason for it. Chris calls 8-9 suited here and flops an open-ended straight draw. This was a player that he said had been c-betting quite a bit and had c-bet pretty much the same big, whether it was with big strength or no strength. And that's what happened here. Villain bet 3,200 here into 3,600. Well, I just wanted to make it really simple for him, and also, it's simple for me, and it'll be good for our discussion again. I just assumed that we just called it 50-50, that we would get called, and when we did get called, I was just keeping it really simple and gave the villain ace 10, as shown by the word here. So 5 folds. We were able to take down the current. So assuming we check shove here, check shove it all in. The 5 times that we get folds, we're able to pick up 6,800 each time. That's 34,000. Assuming that we give the opponent just ace 10, we get there roughly 40% of the time. 2 out of 5, we're gonna make our straight draw. So doing the math again with it's explained a little bit more here than the last one, and summing it up, we assume this is going to be a positive expected value play. Now, a huge part of this is our read. The fact that we know he will put in a big bet with a hand and with nothing. So, if this is a type of player that only is betting 3,200 here with the nuts or overs, something that we don't have as much fold equity or just straight equity verse, it's not going to make this play as good or as valuable in the long run. So it's definitely going to come down to reads as well. What you expect your opponent to do, or what you believe your opponent can or will do, based on previous action. This hand, really blew this student away, and he had never thought of positive EV that way, or using, a play like checking to induce that bet, in order to make his check raise as a semi bluff more profitable. So I hope you guys totally get it. And let's see. We'll take a quick look as it actually went down. Student just check raised, and unfortunately, the villain thought that he did have some fold equity, or that he was ahead enough to just jam ace king. I don't know that he necessarily calls there. If we did just check shove it all the way in, he might have just folded. We'll never know. But something that was interesting to that student, and just further discussion and a little bit more in-depth look at calculating expected value and how it's so important. All right, so now we're going to look at a spot where it's kind of similar to the last the check shove spot, where we used another player's aggression to give ourselves a little bit more fold equity, and to make a spot even though it was probably close to plus EV as is, even more so. Okay, it's limped around to us. We flick it in here with the draw. And I lead 90 here. Big draw. Connie here had been pretty active, and I thought was capable of raising. Thought some other players could have raised as well. Also, could have got called in a couple different spots and got a really good price on a huge draw. Um, you know, Connie raises it up here, and rather than just call, I decide to jam it in here. Um, you know, use my full fold equity. Be a nice addition to the stack if we just pick it up here, and yeah, and don't have to rely on hitting the hand at all. And we're out of position, so makes it easier for us when a brick does come off. Luckily for us, we got the fold and was able to have a nice addition to our stack. This is a play that I like to make with draws, in contrast to the check shove, because of the sizing. I just think if I check shove here, let's say that we check around and Connie bets 100 here. Had I checks around to her and she bets 100, I'm not as comfortable just check shoving. There's only 300 in the middle. It's not as big of an addition to our stack, and yeah, I think it's the best way. I think it's the best way to go about that, to play that type of draw deep in a lot of spots. So, I think this is a type of play I kind of touched on earlier in the season with draws, and I hope that gives you a little bit of an alternative or another way to play to play a hand like that. All right, guys. Last slide of the expected value lesson, and just a couple little things that I wanted to touch on. Speculative hands. First off, again, it's very important. Knowing when to set mine, knowing when it might be all right to play suited connectors. Well, more often than not, we're gonna want to focus on position, especially with the suited connectors. But the position will also determine, what size stack I might get involved with. 30 blinds in late position, as long as that's the 30 blinds effective, I'm going to set mine with that just about no matter what. Early position in a tough table with, a lot of re-raising and a lot of action behind, I might bump that up to 40 blinds. And this all goes down to expected value. With if I have under 30, I'm not flopping enough sets or getting paid off enough when we do to make it worth my while in the long run. And we could do some math here. We could put together a whole bunch of assumptions. Say we're going to assume we set mine 100 times, we flop 10 sets, get paid 3. Well, there's just too many assumptions there. For me, it's going to come down to the level that you're, the buy-in level a lot, the level of our opponents, and that all those things are going to come into play. So I don't really feel comfortable just running out an example. But when we do set mine, or say we elect not to set mine, that's because of the expected value. If we think it's a bad spot where we lose more chips than we gain over the long haul, it's all expected value. So keep that in mind when you're thinking about those spots. Suited connectors, same thing. Is limping 4 or 5 suited under the gun on a very aggressive table with 25 blinds plus EV compared to playing 4 or 5 suited on the button behind 7 limpers on, an aggressive table with position? They're just completely different, and one is positive EV and one is not. So, again, just more reiteration that expected value is important, and even when you're not thinking about it specifically, or like I said in the beginning, I think it's a term that's tossed around loosely a lot, or people just say, "Oh, it's plus EV. That shoves plus EV." Some of you might think that plus EV only comes down to whether or not a shove was correct, or a reshove, or a call, but that's not the case at all. Also, I've got other up there. Game selection is huge. Am I positive expected value in certain tournaments? That should come into play when deciding our schedule and how we want to use our bankroll. I'm a good MTT player, but also I don't think I'm positive EV in the 1Ks online on Monday and Tuesday. Small field with really good players, guys that I think I know have a lot more experience than me, and have more talent poker wise. That's something that I'll accept, and I don't think I'm positive EV in those tournaments, and I'll play stuff that I have a bigger edge in. For you guys coming up, it might be deciding the difference between a $10 average buy-in, or maybe bumping up to like 20. You want to play at least some to get an understanding of how the play is. Do we feel comfortable? Do you feel like you're getting run over? Give yourself an honest assessment of your game, and also what you think you should be playing. Another thing to take into account with expected value and game selection and what tournaments you're playing is satellites. Satellite. Choose the 1K example. You might be able to put in $300 into satellites every week, and maybe lower that 1K buy-in to 700, on average, as compared to 1,000, and that might make up for the lost, or the lack of advantage or expected value. So utilize satellites if it's not a question of roll, but is more a question of skill. I think that's a very, very good way to add expected value. Also, as you get better at playing and understanding what's going on your table, or maybe start using a HUD, or just anything that allows you to be able to multi-table a little bit better, well, we can increase our expected value with more volume. You also might diminish your expected value by playing too much and losing your edge. But if you return a 40% ROI on one table, but you're able to return 30% over two tables, that's the best way to go. And it's all about finding a good mix, and that might take time. Another good mix or another good thing to take into account, maybe should I add some more sit and goes, like 45 to 180 mans, in order to help balance the variance that comes with playing humongous field MTTs. That might not necessarily increase your expected value, but maybe increase it in the short run, or keep the variance from being as vast. So, to conclude this lesson, there was kind of a lot of stuff, and it might have bounced around a bit. I apologize. I don't know. I think I could have maybe done a little bit better in some spots and explaining some stuff. Also, it was kind of hard to. It can kind of be hard to find the perfect hand for certain spots, especially when you lost a bunch of hands on your last computer, which is what happened to me. So I'm working with limited hands, but I hope that what did come out helps. Again, I've asked for I've asked for some suggestions, and I've gotten some good ones. I've gotten some ones that weren't as good as well, but keep them coming. I'll take everything into account. Next week we're gonna get back going with more in line with the actual progression of a tournament. Expected value comes into play from the beginning to the end, but I thought it was a good time to start to include it into the series. So I hope it helps. Dank 16 for Deuces Cracked. Have a good one, guys. Bye.